In these weeks together with the Church Go Plan for Grace Church in Winfield, we're exploring what I was privileged to learn from the Indians as I worked with the faith community within the Indian community for 8 years. On this Thanksgiving weekend, I thought it would be interesting to explore what I learned about Thanksgiving from the Indian faith community. I, as always, want to begin with a story that took place at the campground west of Anadarko in western Oklahoma. It's not on any state map, but is along a little-known creek except for the Indian community, where we had annual conference every 3 years. We had a campsite in southeastern Oklahoma and eastern Oklahoma, and this one in western Oklahoma, where we met for annual conferences. It began to rain on Thursday, and so all the vehicles were driven on top of the hill because there was no way that the vehicle could get up the grassy slope of the campground if it continued to be wet. Well, it continued to be wet. It rained. There were intermittent times of pouring rain. Other than that, it just rained for 3 days. And so it was an interesting experience. And after lunch, one of those days, I was walking with 2 women over to the tabernacle, the open air tabernacle that where we had the annual conversation. And it was pouring, and the Indians didn't have umbrellas. And so we were walking in the rain. And as we walked along, suddenly one of the women stopped, drenched. I mean, hair was wet, all her clothes were wet, but she stopped and she looked up and said, "Isn't this wonderful?" And then continued to walk where we had annual conference, singing, sharing, making decisions, unaffected by being soaked by the rain. This was one of the many times I learned that Thanksgiving for the Indians was not an event. Thanksgiving was a way of life. In every life situation, even in the event of the death of a loved one, the attitude of Thanksgiving dominated, for it's a way of life, not an event to occasionally celebrate. Another story. One late evening, or maybe early morning, we were visiting, and I had the opportunity to ask a question. I said, "Okay, unpack for me the rain dance." You know what I've been taught. The rain dance is a prayer for rain. The beat of the drums and the stomping of the feet echoes as thunder in the sky, which would bring rain. The gathered Indians from several tribes shared with me the different and distinct facets of the rain dance in their tribe. They teased me with a question, and that is, do you know what all these different rain dances have in common? Well, I tried to listen, and I tried to think about, okay, the beat of the drum, the dance, the formation, and I couldn't think of anything. And of course, I failed this teasing test. Then my friend Tom shared with me the answer. What all the tribal rain dances have in common is that the dance was called when the wind was in the east. For the east wind on the plains almost always precedes rain. The rain dance had nothing to do with causing rain. It was a dance of thanksgiving for the rain that was yet to come. Thanksgiving for the Indians is a way of life, celebrating not only what was or what is, but what is yet to become, like the rain preceded by the east wind. You know, in life, sometimes Thanksgiving is suffocated. It's suffocated by what has already happened. It's suffocated by what is happening right now, but not for the Indians, for there is always room for thanksgiving in their hearts for what is yet to become. You know, the biblical admonition of Paul to the early Christians was to pray without ceasing. That always troubled me. I didn't know if that meant all of us need to get to a monastery and pray all the time. But my life with the Indians clarified that admonition of Paul for me. For one of the meanings of the word translated prayer is the root word for thanksgiving. I experienced the Indian attitude of thanksgiving as a way of life, exactly what Paul was encouraging as a lifestyle for the early Christian community. To be thankful without ceasing is a way of life, not an event to be celebrated occasionally. I want to conclude with sharing Karen and my experience in the Indian community in Cochabamba, Bolivia. When we went to Bolivia on a work team, we lived for 10 days among some of the poorest persons in the world. When we were in Bolivia, the per capita wealth in Bolivia was the second lowest in the world, second only to Haiti. It is a country, landlocked country with no seaport for trade, with few natural resources. But for 10 days, Karen and I marveled at the simple sincerity of a happy people who had little in terms of possessions. But they were thankful. They were thankful for life with each other, for the sun by day and by the moon by night. Not much in their past or present would be the source of thanksgiving. But if nothing else, thanksgiving was always possible for what was yet to come, even if it was just one more day to be alive. Wow. To this day, I yearn to be one who does not allow my attitude of thanksgiving to be suffocated by what has happened in the past or what is happening right now, or fearful of what is going to happen in the future. In the faith community of the Indian community, I learned another way to live, and I yearn for that in my life. Thanksgiving is a way of life. Thank you for sharing this time with us and for your thought and our conversation. Now, I'll just give you some starter questions. First of all, what is your experience with your attitude of thanksgiving being suffocated when Thanksgiving was totally absent in your life? Secondly, what is your experience when Thanksgiving became a way of life not an event to be celebrated occasionally. And finally, what is your response to this statement? The absence of joy in one's life is evidence of a life without Thanksgiving. Enjoy your thought and conversation. Thank you for the time together.